So let's talk a bit about the UK politics. Rachel Reeves was speaking at Davos this week, and she hinted that she was pushing for Heathrow to be expanded. It's since been reported that she's going to give a big speech on growth next week. She's going to call for pretty much all of the southeastern airports to be expanded. Now, Candice, there's a big conflict here between this and Labour's other major ambition, which is net zero. Labour is pretty zealous about net zero. It wants to go further and faster than the Conservative Party, further and faster than much of the world. Is there some hope here? Is there a recognition that maybe net zero is actually a problem for Labour's other plans for growth?
Yes. Will they will they have that sort of, Damascene moment where they finally wake up and realize that growth and net zero are just fundamentally incompatible. You can have one or the other, but you cannot have growth. And I think, you've sort of seen the splits within Labour. You've got people like Sadiq Khan, who says he's going to oppose this expansion of Heathrow. But I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are under massive pressure. They've had all this turmoil with the financial markets, who are just unconvinced by their plans for growth. Britain has suffered seriously anemic growth. And maybe it's focused minds, and there's a new pragmatism emerging. Though I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But, you sort of have seen it a bit with Angela Rayner, who sort of, realized, hang on, I need to, override a lot of this stuff. A lot of these planning laws around climate and net zero, which are impeding the building of data centers, for instance. And yet the government has made AI one of its central concerns, and it's spoken about, how they really want Britain to be a leader in AI. But you can't be unless, you're willing to build a huge infrastructure to support this, which net zero will not allow for. Yes, just things like data centers being built, but the electricity demands, which we can't have with our current system. So, like I say, you sort of see signs of them realizing, this isn't going to work. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I don't want to, sort of predict that there's going to be this mass awakening, because it just might not happen.
Yeah, I think my fear is that they're not actually joining the dots. They're saying, we need Heathrow, so let's say yes to Heathrow. We need this data center, so let's say yes to this data center, without thinking, well, what are the underlying, laws, the planning laws, as you mentioned? What are the underlying energy policies that are stopping these things from happening? It's almost like a sort of too much of an ad hoc basis. Let's build this, let's do this, but
and they
philosophy
still
doesn't change.
And I think the other thing is that they're still clinging to this idea that you can have your cake and eat it. That we're going to have this kind of flurry of green jobs. We're going to have this flurry of wind turbines made out of green steel. That yes, we can do Heathrow expansion, but as long as we back eco flying and fuel, then therefore. It's almost like if they kind of pay enough indulgences, it will all knit together. And yet the fundamental problem is that this stuff doesn't work. It is not the route to prosperity, to abundant energy. As Candice rightly said, if you do want to be involved in these supposed technologies of the future, you're going to need a lot of cheap and abundant energy. And that doesn't work in a situation where, as it was happening on Wednesday, because of the weather conditions, about 1% of our energy is coming from wind, because when the wind doesn't blow, you don't get wind power. When the sun doesn't shine, you don't get solar power. This is really basic stuff. And yet they still, I think, convince themselves in a way often quite highly intelligent people can of nonsense, because it's so counterintuitive and complicated. Whereas the fundamentals of energy are now kind of colliding with their highfalutin plans. But I do think that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about how Keir Starmer's Labour government is kind of slightly bucking a bit of a Western trend, as far as you have a very centrist, technocratic government very much clinging to the kind of old orthodoxies, and it's kind of going to be like one final test to destruction of a lot of those ideas, greenism or otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that the cracks beginning to show, but I do fear that we're going to have to endure, closer brushes with blackouts and so on before the penny really drops.
Definitely. Because we still have the commitment to clean energy by 2030. Extraordinarily, that's only a few years' time coming up. The contrast between here and, say, the US, Candice, is absolutely stark. We have Donald Trump saying drill, baby, drill, saying we're going to maximize all of our energy utilities, whereas here we're banning North Sea oil, building wind turbines, shutting down, power plants, things like that. I suppose in Germany as well, we're expecting the failed red-green government to be ousted in February's elections. the tide is turning against this stuff, but we're still a bit of a holdout, even if, okay, sometimes Rachel Reeves says a few angry words about environmentalism.
Yes, I mean, we're in need of a big system reboot and update because the future isn't going to wait for us. It's just not. It just isn't. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you would think a Labour government that's spoken so much about, massive investments in infrastructure, and, they really do believe that. They do believe that the state can massively invest in the technologies of the future, but yet they are still stuck in this very old paradigm, this net zero paradigm, which is just incompatible with that. I mean, you also see, Donald Trump has announced this big partnership, the Stargate partnership.
Yeah.
For billions of dollars, which is what it's going to take.
$500 billion.
Yeah. For AI, but it's going to take that. I mean, this is it. I mean, this is a huge undertaking, and it's achievable, and it's actually so exciting in so many ways. I mean, the problem is as well, one simple thing we've got here is, we've got the highest energy costs. We really do. And a lot of that is just simply due to the fact of net zero, because we cannot have electricity when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. We need abundant amounts of cheap available energy to keep up with this. I mean, we're going to get left behind. And I find that sad because we've got a lot of brilliant people here, and we could have a massive industry that creates so many jobs and creates so much wealth and so much prosperity.